Hello, everyone. I'm Wilson. I'm the founder of Covey, and welcome to episode one of Brands and Growth with Covey. In this podcast, we'll be exploring one question that I get asked quite often by clients and professionals. Is starting a podcast actually worth it in 2026? Over the years, I've had consultants, founders, business owners, creators, professionals ask me different questions about podcasting, whether they should start one, who podcasting is really for, whether to begin with audio or video, what platform to use, and how to choose topics, and whether the industry is already saturated. So rather than answering these questions individually every time, I thought it would be valuable to bring them together into one episode, the first episode of Brands and Growth with Covey. So in this so in this episode, in this episode, I'll be answering some questions, some of the most common questions my clients have asked about podcasting, while sharing practical insight, industry data, and my own personal experience helping professionals use content to build authority, grow their brands, and generate business opportunities. So, if you'll be thinking about starting a podcast or you're trying to determine whether it's the right move for you, this episode should give you a clear framework for making that decision. So let's get started. So the first question: who should even be thinking about starting a podcast? Who should start a podcast? Who should start a podcast? Now, ideally, professionals and consultants, people with deep career experience or industry knowledge, they form one of the first set of individuals who should usually think about starting a podcast. Then we have individuals with strong passion for a topic. So you don't have to be a professional a consultant. You have a passion for something. It might be a hobby. It might be just anything irregular or regular that you are actually passionate about. Yes, you can start a podcast around that topic. For example, there are podcasts that discusses Marvel comics, and you have to define and things like beers, basically anything. So as long as you are passionate, this will help you be consistent, and you wouldn't be bored. Then a third set of individuals who should consider starting a podcast are people who already have hosting experience. Now, this is important because a lot of people have built, or a couple of people have built experience hosting, which is a key aspect of podcasting. So when you think about Stephen Bartlett, if you have that experience, you are able to bring just about anybody onto your podcast to discuss whatever you want to. Joe Rogan, for example, he has vast experience. He had vast experience hosting so many things before he started this podcast. So he's able to cut across so many different topic areas and industries. So if you have a great hosting experience, well, you can always start a podcast. It's usually the most common. Now, interest alone is not enough, which is a key thing. So the point here is this: irrespective whether you fall into any of this group or not, all of it doesn't matter. The one singular factor that determines whether or not you should start a podcast is, can you persist? How long can you go building your podcast before you quit? And I have a benchmark for that. Can you produce 100 episodes of your podcast, 100 episodes in the shortest period of time, say within 6 months to 1 year, consistently, without stopping, whether or not you have views, whether or not you get popular, whether or not people watch that podcast? That is the most important question you should ask yourself before you decide whether or not you should start a podcast. Now the question is, why 100 episode matters. Number one, consistency is the real barrier, not starting. Anybody can start a podcast. There are 1,000 YouTube videos online that will teach you how to start a podcast in say less than 10 minutes. But consistency is what differentiates successful podcasters from unsuccessful podcasters. Statistically, but around 4.5 million podcasts exist, but only 350,000 are consistent. That is less than 10% active. Then 47% of podcasters quit after just 3 episodes. So starting doesn't make you unique here. Why 10% reach 10 episodes? Why 20 less than that actually gets to 20 episodes? And even at 20 episodes, you are not you cannot start counting your eggs. The fact you are not even close to success yet for the vast majority. So in other words, starting doesn't make you unique. It is how long can you remain. But like I said, the benchmark is between 6 months to 12 months. So again, start a podcast if you know you can consistently output 100 episodes between 6 months to 12 months. Why? Well, the reason is quite simple. Number one, if you are just starting a podcast, you are green. You're not, irrespective of whatever level you start from. Say you're a professional. Yeah, the fact that you are a professional, a consultant, a lawyer that has been doing this for thousands of years does not mean you will be successful. No, it does not mean at all. And so the entire ecosystem of podcasting requires it requires you to go through a learning curve. So 6 to 12 months, 100 episodes will give you fast learning through data. You understand what topics works, you see what audience responds to, and you're able to refine your structure and format quickly. Secondly, you have guest and content clarity improves. Yes, you learn the best guest types, especially if you intend hosting. This is a solo podcast, and it will be for a very long time. If I start inviting people, I'll begin to learn. If you are starting now, by within 100 episodes, you will learn how to source the right topic. You get to know the topics your audience actually enjoy listening to, which is very, very, very key. Then skill development also accelerates. Podcasting improves through doing and not planning. Speaking, interviewing, delivery, and they all improve quickly. Now, why most podcasts fail, it's not just numbers, it's the skill development and everything that I've talked about. Most people stop before they build the required skill. Most people stop before they reach the right audience. Most people stop. Even if you have a perfect audience profile, does not usually mean you will get them at once. It takes time. The first 100 episodes are what build the real podcaster. So 100 episode commitment creates mastery. You will improve faster than 99% of podcasters. So because repetition builds skill, clarity, audience, and understanding all together. Now, the next question I have here is the best podcast to study as a beginner. Yes, it's very important that when you want to start any venture, whether podcast or YouTube or whatever social media, you study the best. So, who are the best podcasters or podcasts that you should study? Now, this is where you have to be careful. You must avoid the trap. I call it the top 10 trap, which is usually the most popular podcasts, top 10 in your industry or generally. Why? Because now these guys represent success, but they do not represent the full ecosystem. I'll tell you why. Because top podcasts have millions of views, but there are also thousands of podcasts that have hundreds of thousands of views, even 10,000 or even 100 views. But every level is a part of the system. So, which is why you cannot define success just by the numbers. You only define success by what? By the goal of. You only define the success of a podcast by the goal of the podcaster. What is the intention? Why was the podcast, you understand, launched in the first place? So niche podcasts still succeed differently. That means a podcast that talks about bees with just maybe 10,000 views might be doing well based on their target, way better than, I wouldn't say way better than, beyond beyond what you would imagine a podcast with millions is doing. A podcast that is created purely to say probably get clicks and is hitting the number of clicks it wants to get, is doing better. But if you focus on the top 10, you will most likely just be looking at numbers. A purpose-driven podcast matter. Some exist for education or social impact. They don't chase numbers, but create deep real-world value. So the best strategy for you, if you are looking for podcasts that you can study, is to do what? Do not copy the biggest podcast directly. Study only podcasts that directly align with your own goal or niche. That's simple. And then alignment will reduce confusion and pressure. Yes, alignment will prevent unrealistic expectations and to keep strategy focused and consistent. The third question, the best platform to choose for your podcast. Of course, ordinarily, everybody will say Spotify and most of others, Apple, you understand. Now, personally, I think that the best platform for a beginner who wants to start podcasting today is YouTube, through and through. And the reason for that, we'll talk more about YouTube because there's a question that I answered that really focuses on that. But see, YouTube is the biggest podcast platform today for two reasons. Number one, video distribution. Number two, people do not need to search for you. So now I still talk about this, that the best audio or video, always start a video podcast, but more importantly, start from YouTube and focus on YouTube, especially if you do not have the resources and the framework necessary to balance out multiple podcast platforms. Now, trust me, I've been producing content for a while. The simple act of taking a long form video, cutting it into bits, and posting it on Instagram, that simple activity alone can drag me, or rather can totally undermine my entire YouTube efforts. So, which is why start with YouTube and stay on YouTube for as long as you can. In fact, I'll say stay on YouTube for the first 100 videos. All your attention should be on YouTube. There you are able to grow. There you are able to hone your skill. Remember, your first 100 episodes is not dead. You are not designing it to get all the views. You want to learn, you want to improve, you want to skill up, you want to at least get a feel of the entire ecosystem. Now, you must understand that big podcasters like Joe Rogan and Diary of a CEO, they all grew through YouTube video podcasting early on, before YouTube even became fully optimized for podcasting. So the second reason why you should really focus on just YouTube at first is because of SEO advantage. A well-structured podcast becomes searchable. It shows up in YouTube search. It also shows up in Google search results. One episode has multiple discovery channels. You don't get that on Spotify. You do not get that on Spotify. Then also simplicity. Again, it's easy to just upload and, of course, do what you want to do. So again, I would always put YouTube above every other podcast platform, especially for beginners. Now, a third topic question: how to choose a podcast topic. Now, there are two rules. First, every podcast topic must reflect the audience pain points or needs. Then secondly, it must be phrased the way the audience speaks. Again, it must reflect the pain points, the titling, as well as the subtitling must reflect the pain point, the desire of the audience. And secondly, it must be phrased in the way your audience speaks. Now, topics generally, where do you get them from? It can be from your lived experience, from your, shared pain points with your audience, and from watching other podcasts. But ideas are usually not enough. And so this is where this is important. They must be validated. Now, these 2 points I talked about, which is it must reflect audience pain and it must be phrased the way your audience. These 2 points is built on this foundation that topics must be validated. So How do you validate it? Simple, through research processes. You use tools like SEMrush, TubeBuddy, Answer the Public, Google Keyword, and YouTube search bar. These tools will give you the real audience questions. So, say you want to write, unique to your experience is poultry, and you want to start a podcast on poultry. Of course, if you have been a poultry farmer for a long time, you definitely have the pain points. You definitely, to a large extent, more than any other person, understand how that industry is. But you don't just pick a topic based on that, and then just go ahead and create a podcast episode on it. So you pick that topic, then you plug it into these tools. These tools will then give you enough information, the questions, how the audience are asking the questions, the exact phrasing they are using, search volume and demand, and the competition data. All of these are important in how you then, craft out your topic and the subtopics for that particular podcast episode. Now, topics are not just created again, they are discovered, they are tested, and they are refined through data. The fourth question, so, and final question for this podcast session. My first podcast session, let's go into it. Why is podcasting worth it? Why? Why should you start a podcast today? Now, to understand this, you must understand a basic principle. Video content creation, as it's well now, broadly can be classified under 4 categories. Number one, shorts and reels. These are short videos, usually less than 3 minutes, that are dominant in Instagram, TikTok, and also you have some of them on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is optimizing for that. Then secondly, you have long form. Long form videos are unique to YouTube, primarily YouTube, although you can also upload long form YouTube to you can also upload long form YouTube to Twitter. Yes. Then you have third, you have then this is usually the long form YouTube is usually between 10 to say 30 minutes, say between 5 to 30 minutes. Now there are some long form YouTube content that are above 20 minutes. Yeah, above there are long form YouTube content that are above 1 hour, above 30 minutes, but they are not frequent. And the last are now podcast video content. Video podcast can last for as long as 2 hours, some 3 hours. The average, let's say 1 hour, 30 minutes. Then the final ones are streaming. Yes, streaming is also key. Now, the good thing about streaming is that it can last 24 hours for as long as you want. But now, this is the key, which is why podcasting is important. The longer the content form, the video content form, the higher the chances of you achieving every single reason why people create content: awareness, to convert clients, to build an audience, to promote whatever reason why people create content. The longer the length of video content is directly related to how quick and how successful you achieve your goals. In other words, your reels are shorter, and so you need a whole lot more to achieve your goals compared to long form YouTube, long form content. So YouTube long form content creators, they reach a higher level of authority, they reach a higher level of fame, they reach a higher level of influence faster than Instagram stars. Then the next is podcast. But before I talk about podcast, let's go to streaming. Streaming, as it were, is the craziest. Today we have people like Speed, and most of them who are global stars as a result of primarily streaming. Why? Because video content that runs for hours live on end. In fact, think about the brand Kim Kardashian. they built the entire brand simply on long form video content back then. So my point is this: whether you're a professional, whether you're a consultant, whatever it is you do, the best chance you have to reach your goal through content creation is to go for long form video content. Now, professionals and consultants are not heavy with streaming, but when it comes to all four, podcasting is the best. So you will gain more eventually creating podcasts episodes 1 hour, 2 hours, irrespective. You can even start at 30 minutes and achieve your goals quicker and faster than if you focus on just Instagram reels and shorts or TikTok reels and shorts, or if you focus on just YouTube long form video, which is why everything that I've said is all synced together. Start first on YouTube video podcasts and then move, not even move and then move to the other platforms. But with YouTube, you are able to, your podcast session is uploaded, so it exists both as a long form, very long form video content. It also exists as a well optimized content that can be that can always show up on search engine, as well as on AI search bots like ChatGPT and Claude for research and the rest. So starting a podcast is a very sound business proposition. It's a very sound whatever you want to do, business awareness, whatever purpose you want to achieve online, as long as it is online and it is related to content creation, podcast is still your best option. Yeah, so let's look. Okay, so the last question is the podcast industry saturated? Of course not. It's not saturated. This will be the one reason why many people are not starting podcast, because it looks like everybody has a camera and sets up like and start talking. No, it's not saturated. I mean, I listed out some data at the beginning where I said we have over 4 million podcasts and just about 300 and something are continuing publishing. Only 300 and something are constantly updating, which is less than 10%. To make it worse, I also mentioned how most feel stop producing content after 3 episodes, and a large portion stop after 10 episodes. So the entrance is wide, but if you can persist beyond 10 videos, you have joined a very, very few set of people. If you are able to consistently produce content, especially in a short period of time, you're able to consistently publish episodes in a short period of time, you are in the top 1%. You are in the top percent of those who are in the 300 and something thousand or so are consistent. So it is not saturated. It is only saturated at the bottom. But trust me, many you start with today will feel they will not continue. So yes, podcast is completely worth it today. The industry is just there about $39 billion as the estimates right now. And this is a potential $1 trillion industry. Yeah, the podcast industry is a potential $1 trillion industry. Look at the journey of individuals like Stephen Bartlett. But again, like I said, these guys, they are the top. They do not represent the truth of the entire ecosystem. They are podcasts that are turning in a whole lot of profits and a whole lot of eating their goals in so many ways. So yes, it is not saturated. The best time to start was years ago. Now the second best time to start a podcast is today, which is very, very important. So I think these 4 questions or so answered. So is starting a podcast today worth it? Yes, you should start today. However, remember, which is the most important thing, if you would leave that you should leave this podcast, this episode with, is remember, when you start, your goal is to get 100 podcast episodes in less than 6 months, at most 1 year. And I am certain that even if you do not get what you want, which I am certain you would become an entirely different creature. It's an experience that I think anybody who is really, really looking into creating content for their business or for their personal brand should look into. So this is the end of this um, episode. I hope you gained one or two things. So follow me every day, every single day. I try to produce content around developing your personal brand, of which podcast is a key aspect of it. I am also my brand, my agency, Kovi. We work with personal brands and businesses. So I work with entrepreneurs, startup founders to help them build their brand and grow it online. So subscribe to my channel, follow me, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.